Alright, that's a pretty provocative title, and you probably clicked on this video because you either think I'm a moron and want to tell me in the comments, or because you want to see someone crapping on live service and multiplayer games in general. But I'm not going to do that. And it's not even that I don't like multiplayer live service games. I do. But the multiplayer versus single player game debate has grown into a hydra of the gaming community's own making in the last few years. As publishers have tried to push more and more live service games out into the ether, those who prefer standalone stories they can play by themselves have pushed back. And devout players of these many-faceted multiplayer games have felt the need to come out and defend them, to the point that where you stand on which is best has started to reach console war levels of disagreement. But here's the thing. As long ago as 2009, some outlets were shouting about the death of a single-player experience in gaming. But it hasn't died. The likes of Fortnite, Overwatch 2, even Call of Duty, these have all at one time or another been touted as the horsemen of the apocalypse for the games of old. The would-be usurpers of boring games that had no online aspect and you couldn't play with your friends. But in 2023, single-player games haven't just risen up, they've taken over. 2023's top-rated games so far are all single-player, not just single-player games of a particular genre or type. From Resident Evil 4 Remake to Metroid, from Jedi Survivor to Tears of the Kingdom, there's life in these narrative-driven individual experiences yet. There's a degree of irony in the idea that one of single-player gaming's most vicious critics of the last couple of decades, EA, have somehow completed a full heel turn and produced two of the best games of 2023 in Jedi Survivor and the Dead Space remake. Proof perhaps that they were a little hasty when they first declared in 2010 that single-player games were finished before hammering some nails into its coffin themselves with releases like Dead Space 3 a few years later. But if 2023 has proven anything, it's that in spite of being in an age of free-to-play and live service games, single-player titles are most certainly not dead, and EA can still publish a damn good one when they put their minds to it. And we're all about forgiveness and second chances here. EA know they've been proven wrong, and gamers have provided all the evidence in the best way possible. Sales and bloody good reviews. Take a look at Metacritic's top 10 games this year and you'll find only 3 games with multiplayer elements: Street Fighter 6, Tetris Effect Connected, and Diablo 4. All games that should have multiplayer, not a forced battle royale mode in sight. The top 3 rated games of the year so far are The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, Metroid Prime Remastered, and the new gen upgrade of The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. You've also got Jedi Survivor and Xenoblade Chronicles 3 rounding out that top 10, and just to really round the point home, Resident Evil 4 Remake is reportedly the best-selling game of 2023 so far, alongside the Dead Space remake and Jedi Survivor. Although by the time you're watching this, there's a pretty good chance Tears of the Kingdom will have risen above even that. From the stats alone, it seems players want single-player games more than ever. And yes, a lot of them are remakes, and there's an argument for how good sales for single-player games would be if those remakes were replaced with original releases. But if players are so nostalgic and desperate to play the narrative-driven, one-player games of their childhoods again, doesn't that just show you how much people are crying out for single-player focused experiences, including brand new original IPs? But it's not just stats, is it? Throughout 2023, it's been almost impossible to escape these games, especially across social media. TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, obviously, have been absolutely stuffed with new content from these games. Tears of the Kingdom especially. Rarely has a game taken over the collective conscience of the gaming community for so long and so effectively. Even if it just came down to being able to rotisserie Koroks or build a very not safe for work mech, these games have stayed in our heads and commanded our attention far more than multiplayer games have managed. It'd be remiss of us though to not consider the other possible reason why single-player games are outstripping their multiplayer brethren. 2023 has been an absolute nightmare for live service and free-to-play games so far. But why has it proven to be such a boon for the single-player gamers among us and such a chronic hellscape for the more multiplayer-minded? It's tempting to put this massive rise in success of bigger single-player releases down to something like live service fatigue. Live service games as a thing have been around for a long time, the likes of Team Fortress 2, World of Warcraft, but it's been the likes of Fortnite and Apex Legends that really saw them explode and become such a popular and obviously incredibly lucrative kind of game to make. It's therefore oh so simple to say, well, people are just tired of the formula. They're tired of paying for microtransactions, tired of playing the same kinds of gameplay loop over and over again, tired of the live service system as a whole. And that's probably true, but it's not the main reason, for us anyway. It's also tempting to attribute the incredible success of 2023 single-player games to players' desire to explore more personal stories and play something more fulfilling than a looter-shooter grindfest to unlock a few skins. Certainly, the fact that a lot of 2023's biggest games of the year have been remakes, or remasters of old and incredibly popular games, supports the idea that players want to go back to a nostalgic past where games were built to be explored by you and only you. But I don't think it's really that either. The truth, ultimately, is live service games and multiplayer-focused games have never been worse. From almost constant controversies to baffling decision-making around monetization or removing content, to just straight up throwing games out unfinished in the hopes that they'll stick. It's bad out here in 2023. You don't have to look far into the past to find a prime example on that last point. A lot has been said about Redfall since its release, and I'm not going to bore you by going through all the potential of that game that was wasted by forcing it to become an open world co-op hybrid, but a player count barely touching 500,000 players just a few weeks after release should tell you everything you need to know about how players felt when the meat of the game was released so undercooked it was as good as raw. So many multiplayer games crash and burn before their time, and whether it's because of troubled development or just god-awful monetization techniques, they're really not the guaranteed cash cows they maybe used to be in the early 2010s. But Redfall wasn't a live service game, or not really anyway. So let's go on to something else. Even Overwatch 2, a sequel that nobody really wanted, but at least we understood was probably necessary at the time, has almost become a lesson in how not to run a live service game. And yes, it's obviously still pulling in well over 1 million players a day, which is great. But every other week there seems to be another controversy for the community to backlash against. The removal of a dedicated PvE mode, which was in itself the main justification for the sequel, was just the cherry on top of the burning tire fire of Overwatch 2's many controversies. The game has taken flack for its monetization, something not exactly unique to Overwatch to be fair, but when you put a skin on sale in the store for a character that is currently taken out of the game because of bugs, like happened with Mei a while back, you have to question what exactly are the game's priorities at that point. A good game with bad monetization doesn't really count. And that's all without saying that Overwatch 2 overall is a really good game. It carries over all the charms and mechanics of the original, the switch to 5v5 and removal of a tank role notwithstanding, and expands on them with new characters coming every new season, new game modes, and new maps. It's all good stuff, but it's tainted by the perception of poor decision making, even worse communication, and clearly a desire in the player base to move away from grinding a battle pass to more storytelling driven content if the reaction to the changes to PvE are anything to go by. Even Fortnite, the veritable golden child of live service games, hasn't been immune to alienating huge swathes of its player base this year, when Epic made the seemingly ridiculous decision to vault Trios mode, a mode that let players group up as teams of 3 in the Battle Royale without any real explanation as to why. Such was the backlash and venom from the player base that, to their credit, Epic reversed the decision almost immediately, reinstating the mode a couple of weeks later. But when Fortnite is managing to mess up, you've got to wonder if there's something bigger going on. Hell, even multiplayer games that haven't been released yet are being forced back into the fire by the weight of expectation and fear of fan backlash. Suicide Squad Kill Justice League was roundly panned by critics and fans alike when a gameplay reveal showed off a ton of off-putting live service elements, pushing a more kind of Destiny-style system, but including a bunch of currencies you could no doubt grind for, or pay out of your own back pocket once you'd bought the game. It's now been put on a back burner for another few months while Rocksteady tried to steady the ship against such a negative reaction, but especially after they managed to make such stellar single-player experiences with the Arkham series, a superhero live service looter shooter that required you to be online even when playing as a single player wasn't exactly what players were looking for. And if that doesn't sum up 2023 for multiplayer games and live service titles, I don't know what does. So what does the back end of 2023 and beyond look like for the single player versus multiplayer debate? These kinds of trends in gaming tend to be pretty cyclical, and with the likes of Fortnite and Apex still going strong, live service, or more broadly multiplayer games in general, aren't exactly dead, just like single player games never were. For now, it's more like they're going through a rough patch. The question is whether single player games can keep that hot streak going, or multiplayer and live service games can finally start to shoot back. That's where we stand anyway. What do you reckon to the state of live service games in 2023? Is it really as bad as it seems? Or are single player games just going through a hot streak right now? Any and all opinions, let us know what you're thinking down in the comments. In the meantime, I've been Elliot. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and you should check out these videos to see more of what we do here at GG Recon.